So thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Angela Rastigar. I am the CEO of Sunfish, and I'm delighted to have Michelle from Donor Concierge. Michelle, do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, definitely. Donor Concierge is a company that helps people find donors, surrogates, sperm donors, and really connect you with the best agencies, the best donors, the best clinics. We're here kind of as a starting point on a third-party journey. So here to provide you with um, connections to the best of our wonderful industry.
Great. Well, we're really thrilled to have you. I've known Michelle for years. I am the CEO of Sunfish. We were founded recently to help people afford the very high cost of assisted reproduction and parenthood. And we partner with great organizations like Donor Concierge throughout the country to help connect intended parents with the resources and tools that they need to afford building their family. So specifically at Sunfish, we offer options for loans, lines of credit, grants, and a whole suite of tools to help people afford the cost of building a family through assisted reproduction. So for today, we're going to start with just some basic frequently asked questions about the egg donation process and costs. We'll go into some details around specific costs, how to afford it, how costs are changing, and the tools and resources that we at Sunfish and other companies around the country offer to help you afford this process. So we really encourage you to chat us any questions live as we go through this today. It's always a pleasure to be live and really connect with folks that might be thinking through this process. I know it can be overwhelming, having gone through a small piece of this journey myself through egg freezing. So really excited to offer our guidance, and we're both super available if you have questions after this live session to reach out to either of our teams as well. So with that, let's dive in. Anything you'd like to add before we get going, Michelle?
No, you mean you summed it up, and I think the biggest obstacle for people who are going through this is the cost. And so, working and partnering with a company like Sunfish is just so exciting for us because we talk to thousands of people every year, and they are just astounded at the cost of doing this, and they want to find affordable ways of building their family and so that they without breaking the bank really. So that's again why we're here to put them in touch with people like Sunfish and really help them get started.
Very well said. So that is a perfect segue. Why don't we start with just diving into the basic cost? How much does egg donation cost?
Okay, great. So that's a great question, and one that has many answers. We always explain to people the cost can range from anywhere from say 15 to 16,000 all the way up to 40 to 50,000. There's lots of different items that go into those costs, so we can help kind of creatively put together a plan to either lower the costs, or it depends on kind of what you're looking for in a donor. So if you're looking for, if you're okay with a frozen egg bank or your clinics program, that's going to be a more cost-effective approach. But if you're working with an agency, there's a lot more involved. So agency fees, insurance, or travel, things like that plus there's the medical fees involved as well. So it can range, but we usually tell people to budget from anywhere from 15,000 for the donor cost up to 40, which may or may not include your medical fees.
Right. So that would be for a couple that has access to their own womb. For example, a hetero couple that would be using
Right.
their womb. If you need to also work with a surrogate, we'll talk about that in a little bit in terms of the cost there. But for today, we're really just going to focus on if you are able to carry yourself and you're just an egg donor. So Michelle, can you explain in a little more detail some of the specific tactics that folks can use to reduce the cost?
Sure. So, you've got to think through, like, what is your ultimate goal? What's the amount of money you have to work with, and then work backwards. So the ways to reduce cost are, first of all, starting with your clinic. Does your clinic have a program in-house? We call it an in-house clinic program where they've already vetted the donors. The donors have probably already had their genetic testing done, their fertility testing. That's a really great way of reducing the cost, because you're not paying, donors normally local as well, so you're not paying travel. You're just paying the medical fees, and if there's compensation to the donor, it'll be within the package that the clinic offers. So that's usually you may not get the choice of donor, because most often clinic programs have a smaller pool of donors. But there's some amazing clinics out there, and the donors are already prepped and they understand what they're going to do. Another way is using a frozen egg bank. Frozen eggs are for the right couple or single person who's just wanting to have one child, and we always recommend that you talk with your doctor, your reproductive endocrinologist, before you decide to use frozen eggs, because there may be a reason why that's not the right fit for you. Frozen eggs are purchased in they're already retrieved from the donor. They're ready to go. They're usually cohorts of 6, so you purchase 6 eggs, and sometimes there's guarantee programs. Some of the egg banks do that. Some of them, guarantee. You may not, again, if you have a cohort of 6 eggs, you may get maybe 2 blastocysts, which is the embryo that's going to go to pregnancy. So you have to think through, okay, is that going to be enough for my situation? And if I need more eggs, if it doesn't work, you're likely going to have to go with a different donor. So the choices, again, are kind of limited, but the costs are usually reduced. So we do suggest that you talk it through with your clinic first, whether frozen is the right way to go.
That is great advice. So let's talk a little bit about how people can find resources once they've done everything they can to lower the costs. We're still looking at 15,000 to 40, or I've seen as much as 55,000, including medical costs. What do you recommend in terms of financing?
Well, obviously, I recommend Sunfish. I would always start with, I think when I get those calls from people who say, "Oh, I've maxed out my credit cards to do this," it breaks my heart, because it's just if you go through a loan financing that is safe, I think it's a much better way, because there's so many things that come up sometimes in this journey that you don't realize, and you don't know what we always say, you don't know what you don't know before you start this, which is where we come in, because we can really identify issues that might occur that are going to be costly and help you to avoid those. So for example, helping people choose the right donor through an agency. That's the sort of thing that we're trying to reduce the costs, but obviously going to a loan company is going to be your best option.
Thank you. That's very well said. So a little bit of background around us at Sunfish. We started, actually, I was working at a surrogacy agency and egg bank, and was really frustrated with the options that were available for our intended parents to afford this journey. So looked at all of the different lenders, personal loans, credit card options that were out there, and there really was nothing suited specifically for assisted reproductive journeys, as well as a comprehensive financial planning toolkit. So that was the background for why we started Sunfish. The rest of our team comes from deep consumer lending expertise, consumer fintech expertise, and the healthcare sector. And we've created a platform to help people find the best loan and financing options for them. It's really comprehensive. As Michelle mentioned, there's a lot of different components to this journey, and the financial component can be one of the most overwhelming pieces. So our mission is to make assisted reproduction and parenthood affordable to all types of families, whether that's single parents, hetero couples, same-sex couples. We work with a lot of trans and queer parents. And in terms of the support that we offer, everyone is matched with a financial advocate who's a real human that you can talk to and kind of work through some of the logistics and pieces around affordability. We also offer one of the most comprehensive marketplaces to find a loan or line of credit for your household. Our system will automatically search through a number of different lenders on the back end that can support super prime, prime, and even some subprime borrowers with low interest loans. And so when someone comes to us, our mission is really to help you find all the different tools and resources on the financial side of your toolkit to afford this journey, whether that's a loan or reducing the total cost or finding access to a discount. So we really love working with partners like Donor Concierge that can provide such deep help in terms of the process. And we try to do the heavy lifting when it comes to just making sure you have everything you need for cost. So with that, I would love to hear your thoughts on egg donor agency fees and a little bit more about what the agency does to supplement the network.
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about egg banks and clinics, but a lot of people find their donor through an egg donor agency. And we work with, I think it's almost 200 different egg donor agencies. There's a lot of them out there, and they basically are there to represent and recruit donors, but also to make sure that that donor goes to cycle and is really supported through that journey. They also obviously support the intended parents as well, but our job is to find the donor through our network of agency partners and connect our intended parents to the agencies that we know and trust. So the agency is there, as I said, recruitment of donors, supporting the donor, coordination, and guiding the process. They may recruit through, universities or through their local community, but they're there again. We want to make sure that the agencies are really explaining the process to the donor, so making sure she knows this is a medical procedure. They'll be there for her to talk it through, make sure gets to her appointments. They connect with the clinic coordinator to guide, the donor to what she has to do next. And also their job is to make sure that the legal agreements are signed, that the attorneys are brought on board, that the donor has insurance. And the good agencies are there to really support both parties too.
Wonderful. And one question that we always get asked is, how much does the egg donor receive in compensation, and does the agency take any piece of that?
Oh yeah, and it's a real common myth, and I love this question, and I love to explain the reality. So donors set their own compensation. Agencies may tell them, this is a viable compensation, and explain, who are these intended parents. So who are these people, they may cater to a clientele that, say, isn't super wealthy, that they just, they've already gone through multiple IVF cycles. And so asking a huge compensation they may not be able to match them with their clients. So the donors, they do set their own compensation, and it is set usually into a separate escrow fund. So in California, it is the law to do that. And so it is taxable as well. So it is completely separate from the agency fee. The agency fee is usually payable once they're officially matched, and it may be every agency is different, but it may be that they pay a down payment. They may not pay anything until the donor passes the screening. They may pay the full. That's again what we're doing, is we're identifying all these different rules from all different agencies and kind of explaining the process to them and helping people to feel confident in choosing the donor and the agency that we've connected them with.
Absolutely. Having worked with hundreds of intended parents going through the process myself, having an agency, from my observations, can really help take some of the stress around this coordination piece. And I think a lot of people forget that maybe the first donor they pick might not work out and might not pass screening. So it can be so helpful to have an agency there to help you along the way.
Actually, I just wanted to jump in because I realized, a lot of the myth too that people don't realize about agencies is a lot of the donors, when they go through an agency, they haven't had any testing done either. So that the agency, again, is there to identify donors that are likely to be suitable, but they don't do any fertility testing. There's actually a couple that do, to be fair. They don't do any fertility testing, and they don't do any genetic testing. And there's a reason why, and that is because the donor needs to be a patient of a clinic to have that done, so that she's supported through whatever the results of that are. So you are going, a lot of people are worried about working with agencies, but you are going in with it with a little more unknowns about the process and about the donor herself. But the agency, generally you're going to have more choice when you use an agency donor because there's more women out there who are working through agencies than through, say, clinics or egg banks.
Yes, that is a great clarification, and would also be helpful for you to speak a little bit about the myth that frozen eggs are cheaper than a fresh egg donor cycle. I think it's much more complicated than the initial number you might see if a clinic gives you a cost sheet to purchase a batch of eggs. So can you talk a little bit
Yeah.
about
I mean, I touched on it a little bit at the beginning about frozen eggs, and it does seem like it's an easy solution. You just go to an egg bank, buy some eggs. But I feel that if you only want one child, great. And as I said, a lot of the egg banks have guarantees, which is wonderful. But none of this is a it is science, but there's also a little bit of like unknown in the whole process of IVF. We just never know completely what the outcomes are going to be. So if you have an IVF cycle and you only get 6 eggs, that's not a huge amount of eggs. So it is better to work with a larger pool of eggs to create your family. So to give you the options of having multiple transfers if the first one doesn't work. But for some people, frozen eggs are great. But again, if it doesn't work and then you have to purchase another cohort, you're likely, as I said, going to purchase a different donor, the eggs from a different donor, because we can't guarantee that those eggs are going to be available. And also, then you're paying again for for another batch of eggs when you could have actually worked with an agency donor, and likely you will be given all the eggs from that cycle. So she could have, for instance, retrieved 15 eggs, which would be a great cycle. 15 to 18 eggs, and then creating enough embryos to create multiple, have multiple children in your family. So again, these are kind of decisions we really encourage people to speak with their clinic first before they start working with us, so we can really get to know what is their goal for their family building, and what does their clinic recommend.
Absolutely. Great. Well, that's really helpful. Let's go into a little more detail on the cost. I know we talked about those top line numbers, but can you just break down for our listeners today kind of the range of egg donor agency fees,
Sure.
Insurance, attorney, the compensation for egg donor, etc.?
Yeah, so egg donor agency fees range. They range from, I'd say they start at around 7,000 and go up to 15. The higher end is usually, again, it's for recruiting and supporting kind of donors that are maybe a little harder to find. So they've spent money using, to recruit these donors, things like that. Maybe they're international donors. So there's a lot that goes into the kind of the logistics of that. You've got things like your fertility attorney. So everybody should have an attorney involved right from the get-go. We're here to provide references. Both the donor and the intended parents will have attorneys who are representing them. And the contracts are pretty straightforward, but it's always good you start with the agency agreement. So you're signing to work with that agency, and then you have the legal contracts involved. So there's going to be a cost, and could range from $800 for just a standard contract review up to, $15,000 for an egg donor journey. Or if you're working with a surrogate as well, they may have to draft a whole new contract, which could be around $5,000. And we always, again, we give most of the attorneys, and using a specialist fertility attorney who understands assisted reproduction, they'll mostly, our partners in that space will usually give a consultation for free, so you can get to know them and learn more about their fees. And then I think there's a question, actually, do people have to pay to reserve an egg donor? Sorry, I'm moving on to other questions, but
yeah, our questions from our audience.
Yeah, exactly. And the answer is sometimes yes. There are more intended parents looking for donors than there are donors. So these donors get matched really quickly. So we actually encourage we call it a hold fee. We want the agencies to do that because it gives everybody a little skin in the game. And sometimes it's around $500 to hold that donor for maybe a week or 2 weeks. And that basically gives the intended parents a chance to, you know, feel comfortable. And also it gives them, the agency, a chance to send the donor's information, and if she's done previous cycles, to the clinic to review and to assess whether this is a good donor for this particular family.
Great. Okay. Very helpful. So in terms of the overall cost, I think that's a great breakdown of some of the components that folks will be looking out for. I'll just add, on our end at Sunfish, we finance up to $100,000 for parenthood and assisted reproduction needs. That funding can go towards agency fees, legal fees, IVF clinic fees, and pharmacy fees. So you'd have to pay the medication for your egg donor if you're doing a fresh retrieval as well. And we do not finance the cost of the egg donor's compensation. So that's something that would not be included in financing. But there's some other costs that we might be able to cover. For example, your egg donor would usually travel to your clinic and do a retrieval near you. And as Michelle always points out, it's one consideration factor is where you're doing that retrieval, because you'll typically pay for your egg donor if you are doing a fresh retrievals, flights, hotels. So somewhere like Portland would be a little more cost effective than somewhere like San Francisco, but we can help cover those costs. We also got a question coming in about fertility grants and discounts. And so at Sunfish, we actually have for free on our site one of the largest databases of discounts and grants that's available. It's searchable by specific demographics. So there's some grants that are available to cancer survivors or frontline workers, for example. So feel free to reach out to us for that. We always start with trying to make sure that we bring down the total cost as much as possible. We'll help you look into whether or not you have employer benefits or even insurance coverage that could cover a portion of this. And then whatever is left over as cash pay is the part that will help you finance. So I think that is a great overview. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the financing market, but Michelle, is there anything else that we didn't cover in terms of the cost and FAQs regarding the egg donation process?
Yeah, actually, I was thinking a big question we often get is, donor compensation. And again, I touched on that a little bit. And donors do set their own compensation, but you can usually they request between $8,000 and $15,000. Now, some donors will request a little more than that, depending on some factors. Maybe they have done this before and they know that they produce good eggs, so they request a higher compensation. But again, it's about thinking through, like, what are your goals for your family? And the most important thing really is this donor able to do this, willing to do this, and does she have good fertility? Those are the three most important things. I like to bring that back to people, because in the end, the donor is providing this amazing gift, and it's priceless, really. That doesn't mean that you have to pay, $100,000 in compensation for a better donor, but I think that you have to look at all your options and decide who's the right person for you and your family.
Absolutely. You brought up a great point, and I will just add as a interesting legal caveat that I find surprises a lot of people. The compensation for the donor is technically for her time. Yeah. And she's not being compensated for the eggs themselves. In the US, you can't sell human tissue. So it's just a good caveat. The eggs truly are a donation, and I really do feel egg donors are heroes in helping people bring their family to life. So they definitely deserve everything they ask for and more in terms of the time and effort that they put forward.
Absolutely. And sometimes and we're moving into an age of transparency and being open with children, and it's just really, I think it's an exciting time too for this whole space.
Absolutely. And speaking of timing, a good opportunity to touch on what's happening with interest rates if you are considering a loan. This year was an unprecedented hike in interest rates, and we do anticipate rates to continue to rise into next year. So That means if you're considering a loan, your monthly payment, if your interest rate has shot up from, let's say, 4% APR to something like 12% APR, your monthly payment's going to be a lot higher. We expect when the Fed meets on December 13th, rates may be raised one more time this year. So our advice, if you're considering this process and might need financing, again, I'm not a legal financial advisor, so this is not official financial advice, but just generally, if I were speaking to a friend, I would say consider taking out a loan sooner rather than later if you might need financing to lock in today's rates. We're doing our best to continue to monitor and educate folks on potential changes, but that just generally seems to be the trend. So worth keeping that in mind, that interest rates will likely continue to rise. And at Sunfish, all of the loan options that we offer have 0 early prepayment penalties. So we'll see many intended parents take out a loan just with the knowledge that, maybe we'll get a bonus at the end of next year and be able to pay it off in full early. But at least we have this optionality and we're not dipping into our savings at the point in time when we're trying to build a family. So I guess the last question, just to touch on quickly, if someone did need a surrogate to build their family, what's the estimated range for costs there, Michelle?
Yeah, and again, it's a lot higher than using an egg donor. We estimate between 120,000 to up to 210. And again, there's a lot of things that go into it that are unknown at the beginning, but we can really help to identify ways of, cutting down on some of the costs. There's a few kind of things that we can't cut down on. The donor or the surrogate has to have insurance, health insurance. If she doesn't already have it through an ACA plan, that you may have to take out an extra insurance, private insurance company. And then there's agency fees, surrogates compensation, things like that. But again, our role and our goal is to reduce the risk by identifying the best candidates so that you're not kind of matching with a surrogate, for example, who's not going to pass the medical clearance for your clinic. We work very closely with all the clinics and agencies that are, have a very transparent pricing structure and what happens at certain times during the process. So we explain all that as we go, and it's a whopping great cost. And a lot of our clients have already been through, multiple IVF cycles and spent their life savings. So knowing what these costs are, working with Sunfish kind of to put a plan together before is really the most, that's our goal really, is just to be transparent, know what you have to, know what to expect. I think and then work with a financial company like Sunfish to really put that in motion. And then we can kind of get you through the next part of the journey.
Absolutely. That's so well said. And we really recognize that this is a stressful, difficult, emotional, physically challenging process for people. So our goal is to take the stress out of the financial piece and really be your partner to help you plan along the way. We're always honored when we get to be a part of someone's journey to building their family. And it's, of course, an honor to work with great groups like Donor Concierge and Michelle's team. So with that, for us, if you wanted to reach out to learn more, you can message us on Instagram or Facebook. We're here at Join Sunfish. Our website's joinsunfish.com, and you can get access to a financial advocate or to our team by emailing support@joinsunfish.com. Michelle, what's the best way for folks to follow up with you?
Best way is to go to our website, which is donorconcierge.com, and we have a free consultation button that you can click and talk to one of our team members, case managers, about what you're in need of and how we can help. And as I said, we talk to thousands of people every year, and we're more than happy to talk to anybody about their journey.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It was wonderful to chat with you. I'm sure this will be helpful to many intended parents, and hope everyone has a great afternoon. Thanks so much.
Thanks.